Hello guys, welcome to DrNightStare. I know you guys come here to relax and take a nap, so before we go, please hit like and subscribe. By the way, also tell me what time and where you guys listening from. Alright then. The air bit with February cold, cutting through the thin walls of our home. Her voice, already a rasp from the whiskey, ripped through the kitchen. She slammed the boy against the counter, then struck his head with an open hand, a sound I would never forget. He dropped to the linoleum, a crumpled heap. I saw his eyes roll back, empty and unseeing. My legs felt cemented to the floorboards. My throat closed. I stood watching her kick his still form, one heavy boot after another, a dull thud with each impact. My son did not move. He lay there, utterly still. My wife swayed then, her rage spent, her body giving out. She slid down the wall, hitting the floor with a pathetic sigh. Her eyes closed as she collapsed into a heavy stupor. I watched her for a long moment. My son's stillness demanded something. A decision formed in me. I walked to the bedroom and pulled a pillow from the bed. Its soft weight felt neutral in my hand. I returned to the kitchen. She breathed ragged snores on the cold linoleum. I placed the pillow over her face. My hands pressed down. Her body thrashed once, then twice, a weak struggle beneath the fabric. I did not move my hands. The thrashing stopped. Her breathing ceased. I lifted the pillow away. Her face looked slack, peaceful in a way it had not been for years. I went to the living room and picked up the telephone. I dialed 911. My voice sounded flat when I spoke into the receiver. I told them what I had done. I killed my wife. I killed my son. Officers crashed through the front door, their faces hard as they entered the kitchen. One of them immediately pushed me against the cold wall and placed my hands behind my back. They secured my wrists with tight cuffs. The paramedics arrived just behind the police, moving to my son on the floor. I watched them work on him as the officers led me from the kitchen toward the door. Just as my shoulder passed the door frame, a paramedic called out, his voice sharp and clear. "He's alive," the paramedic said. "The boy is breathing." Those words struck me with a brutal force that twisted everything I had understood. My wife's death, once a necessary act, transformed into pointless murder. My hands were already stained. The court found me guilty of my wife's murder, and the judge sentenced me to 20 long years in prison. My son, though alive, never visited me. He refused every letter and phone call I attempted from prison. That refusal grew into a deep resentment inside me with each passing year. The prison gate clanged open, a final metallic groan, and I walked into the afternoon light. 20 years had stripped the world bare. My old house stood before me. I pushed open the front door. The air smelled of dust and wood. A man's voice called out from the living room. My son stood there. A woman was beside him, and 2 small children clung to her legs. His face was older. He told me to leave. His voice was tight with anger. He said I had no right to be there, that this was his family now. His rejection brought a sudden heat to my chest. My hands began to tremble. I looked at the small children, then I looked at him. The rage I had carried for 20 years broke free. I grabbed a small girl and pulled her close. My son lunged at me. I pushed her away, then hit him with the heavy vase from the mantelpiece. The woman screamed. The other child started crying. I struck my son again. He fell to the floor. The woman tried to run. I caught her arm. Her scream ended. I heard the girl whimper from the corner of the room. The other child watched from behind the sofa. I walked into the kitchen. The kettle was on the stove. I filled it with water and placed it on the burner. The water began to boil. I found a teacup in the cupboard. A comfort settled over me. I poured the steaming water into the cup. This tea was good, I thought, taking a sip. The silence around me grew deep. The 5 years with Michael had become the most vibrant part of my existence. I was 55 when our paths first crossed. He was 41, a man with a quiet understanding that settled my spirit. Every morning began with his strong arms around me, his gentle breath stirring my hair. We lived in our small cottage by the lake, surrounded by old oak trees. Our days unfolded in a simple pattern, bringing perfect joy. We drank coffee on the porch as the sun climbed the sky. He read the morning news aloud while I tended the herb garden, pulling small weeds from the rich soil. Michael possessed a calm intelligence, and his kind eyes always held a warmth that spoke directly to my spirit. He was handsome. He had dark hair, and it often fell in soft waves across his forehead. His smile softened the edges of any lingering worry. We spent countless evenings on our worn sofa, holding hands and watching the lake water ripple under the moon. Small moments, like the way he always remembered my favorite tea, or how he'd leave a single wild daisy on my pillow, built the foundation of our happiness. He taught me to fish, guiding my hand as I cast the line into the cool water. I learned to cook his grandmother's apple pie recipe, filling our kitchen with the sweet smell of cinnamon and baked fruit. There was a peaceful rhythm to our lives, a steady beat of shared laughter and quiet contentment. This afternoon marked our 5th anniversary. A happy tune played in my mind as I drove towards the grocery store, envisioning the special dinner we would share. Michael would be home soon, and I looked forward to another beautiful evening with the man who made my world complete. I pulled into the intersection, my thoughts still on the special evening ahead. A blare of a horn ripped through the peaceful afternoon. A crimson sedan surged forward from the cross street, ignoring the red light. I gripped the steering wheel with all my strength, but there was no time to swerve away. The collision struck my car with immense force. Metal shrieked and bent around me. My body slammed against the seatbelt, then rebounded against the headrest. A searing agony exploded behind my eyes, and the world dissolved into an empty darkness. My eyelids fluttered against a bright light. A dull ache settled deep inside my skull. My vision blurred, slowly clearing to reveal a white ceiling. The air smelled of antiseptic. I lay in a hospital bed, the sheets crisp around me. My body felt heavy and weak. A woman in blue scrubs stood beside my bed. She wore a kind expression. "You are awake," she said with a gentle tone. "You have been sleeping for a long time." The words drifted through my thoughts. My mouth felt dry. "Michael?" I whispered, my voice barely making a sound. "Is he here? What about the accident?" The woman tilted her head. "No one named Michael has visited you," she said slowly. "There was no car accident." My chest tightened with sudden dread. "What do you mean? The red car? The crash?" I pushed the words out. My voice grew stronger. She stepped closer to the bed. "You were admitted 3 weeks ago. You were not in a car crash," she explained. "You were brought in after being severely beaten. Your husband admitted you." The nurse nodded. "We need to clear up some things for you." She reached for a small stack of items on a nearby table. She picked up a newspaper and held it out. "This was brought in with your personal effects." My eyes scanned the front page. The date at the top right corner burned into my vision, October 26, 2025. I stared at the numbers, unable to process them. My anniversary with Michael had been today, October 26, 2053. A coldness spread through my veins. The nurse placed the paper back down. She then picked up a small handheld mirror and offered it to me. "Perhaps seeing yourself will help." I took the mirror. My hand trembled as I brought it up. My hair, usually streaked with silver, was now lank and dark. It framed a face that looked 30 years younger. Dark bruises spread across one cheek and along my jawline. A jagged cut, still purple and swollen, ran above my left eyebrow. This was not the 55-year-old woman I knew. I was 25. The woman in the mirror was terrified. Michael's kind eyes, his strong arms, our cottage by the lake, the gentle rhythm of our 5 years together. All of it dissolved into nothing. He never existed. Our perfect life was a dream, a beautiful fabrication my mind had conjured while my body lay broken and unconscious. I had been living a lifetime that never happened. The dream world had protected me from the truth, from this brutal, undeniable reality. The husband the nurse mentioned earlier was the man who had done this, the man I had thought I had escaped. My heart constricted with a pain far deeper than any physical injury. I closed my eyes, trying to recapture the warmth of Michael's hand, the scent of apple pie, the sound of his laughter. Only the sterile hospital air filled my lungs. The life I had just lived, the happiness I had known, was irrevocably gone. I opened my eyes to the terrifying present, to a brutal past that had swallowed my future. My earliest memories are of the cold house, a chill that seemed to seep from the walls, clinging to the air inside. My bedroom closet was a dark place where coats hung, their sleeves suggesting a presence. One night, a distinct sensation of being watched woke me, pulling me from sleep. I lay very still, my breath caught, my eyes wide open in the dark. 2 points of pale light glowed from the closet's crack, unblinking and focused on my bed. My heart hammered against my ribs in the quiet room. I squeezed my eyes shut, wishing they would disappear, then opened them again, finding the light still fixed upon me. I screamed, a raw sound tearing from my chest. My parents rushed in, their faces bleary with sleep. The overhead light banished the pale glows from the closet's depths. My mother held me close. My father peered into the closet, finding it empty after moving coats. He ran his hand along the back wall, finding nothing. "It was just a dream, son," he said. He spoke with firmness. "Your imagination is running wild." My mother stroked my hair, assuring me it was just coats and shoes. They tucked me back into bed. The warmth of their presence was a shield against the return of the cold, but their words did not erase the memory of the eyes. The next morning, the closet door remained open. Its darkness remained even in daylight. The eyes were only the beginning. Later, the lady began to appear. She stood at the end of the hallway, a tall shadow against the dim light from the bathroom. Her neck stretched long, reaching towards the ceiling, and her head tilted at an unnatural angle. I first saw her when I was 5, during a nighttime trip to the kitchen. Her form was vague. Her presence was absolute. She was silent. I froze, unable to move or make a sound, watching her. She never moved or made a sound. Her stillness was terrifying. I would creep back to my room, my body rigid with terror, pulling the covers over my head, convinced she watched me go. I told my parents about her the next day, describing her height and the long stretch of her neck. My mother laughed, a light sound, and it was dismissive. "Oh, that's just your imagination again," she said, waving a hand. "You're a very creative boy." My father nodded from behind his newspaper. "There are no ladies with long necks, son. That's a story from your dreams." Their responses baffled me. How could they not see her? How could they dismiss something so real? Their cheerful disbelief was a betrayal. It taught me that my fear was illogical, unfounded, a product of my own making despite my experiences. The lady appeared often after that. She was always in the same spot, silent and still. I learned to navigate the house at night, avoiding the hallway's end and choosing detours through other rooms for the kitchen or bathroom. Sometimes I glimpsed her from the corner of my eye, a fleeting dark shape that sent a jolt of terror through me before I looked away. I stopped telling my parents about her. Their answers never changed. Their certainty only made me feel more isolated in my fear. I began to accept these strange occurrences as a normal part of living in our house, a private reality that existed only for me. This house and its inhabitants became my secret, a companion to my waking hours and my sleep, weaving normalized dread into the very essence of my childhood. Moving out of my childhood home was like shedding a skin I had worn too long. I remembered the coldness of the place, but leaving it behind brought a lightness I had never known. The air outside felt different, cleaner. I breathed deeply, finding a freedom that settled into my bones. My small apartment in the city offered simple quiet. No eyes watched from dark corners. No long-necked figure waited in the hallway. I slept soundly, without fear, without the old vigilance. The house became a fading echo in my memory, a story I had outgrown. I met Clara, and she became my wife. She was warm and practical. She filled my life with a different kind of quiet, a comfortable stillness I had not known was possible. We built a new life together, far from the shadows of my past. The visits back to my parents' house began as an obligation, then became a routine. Each time I felt a familiar tension tighten in my chest as we approached the old structure. I tried to dismiss it, telling myself it was only nostalgia, or perhaps the usual awkwardness of adult children visiting their parents. Clara noticed the atmosphere quickly. She never mentioned the specific details of my childhood terrors, for I had never told her, but she felt the house's particular chill. I watched her during our visits. Her movements grew careful inside the house. Her eyes darted into shadowed corners. She often hugged herself, her arms wrapped tightly around her body, even when the heating was on high. She would stand by the windows, looking out, her back to the room, as if something behind her might suddenly appear. One evening, my parents had gone to bed. Clara and I sat in the living room. A sudden draft swept through, despite all the windows being closed. Clara visibly jumped, pulling her legs onto the couch. She looked at me, her eyes wide. "There's something here," she said. Her voice was quiet, a persistent dread. "It follows me from room to room." She shuddered. "I feel watched all the time." Her words sent a cold tremor through me. It was not my imagination. It was not just a child's fanciful mind. Clara, who was so grounded in reality, felt it too. The oppressive atmosphere I had known was not confined to my own head. It was real. It clung to the house's long corridors, a tangible, suffocating weight. The house still possessed its power, reaching out, touching others, extending its grip beyond my childhood and into my adult life, even threatening the peace I had found with my family. My parents died within months of each other. The house stood vacant then, cold and silent. Its life had left with them. I walked through its empty rooms during the days. The air felt heavy. The familiar chill persisted, even with no one living there. Each floorboard creaked under my steps. Each shadow held a memory. The decision came to sell the property. Before that, I needed to clear it, to renovate it. I knew the house held an oppressive weight, but I had to face it one last time. I approached the task with a deep reluctance. I hired a crew. They specialized in old home renovations. They started work in the basement first, the lowest point, the deepest part of the house. I had avoided that space for years. It was perpetually damp. It smelled of earth and something else I could never name. The crew began tearing out old insulation and plaster. They exposed the raw bones of the structure. The call came a week later. It was the lead foreman. His voice sounded tight. He asked me to come to the house immediately. I felt a knot of dread tighten in my stomach. It was the old feeling, the one that had haunted my childhood. I drove there, my hands gripping the steering wheel. The house loomed cold and indifferent under the gray sky. The air in the basement felt thick. The smell hit me first. A dense, earthy stench, sickly sweet, filled my lungs with a sudden force. It tasted like decay. It was worse than any odor I remembered. The foreman stood in the center of the room, shining a powerful flashlight onto a section of the wall. Other workers stood back, their faces pale. The wall was not merely damp. A thick, dark growth pulsed on its surface. It spread invisible patterns across the plaster. It pushed through cracks in the foundation stones. It climbed wooden beams, a network of decay. Black masses blossomed in corners. Greenish-gray tendrils snaked along the ceiling joists. It resembled something alive. It writhed with a dark, pervasive energy. The foreman pointed to a section where a wooden support beam had simply rotted away. It resembled chewed paper. The house's structural integrity was severely compromised. It had been compromised for a long time. He explained what they found. He used technical terms. The air in the house had been filled with spores for decades. He told me about the type of fungus. He described how it produced mycotoxins. He outlined the impact of these toxins on the human brain. They affected perception. They induced states of paranoia and anxiety. They could trigger visual and auditory hallucinations. My stomach churned. The persistent coldness. The eyes in the closet. The lady with the long neck. Clara's dread. All of it had a tangible source. It was not supernatural. It was a poison. It was a slow, invisible attack, a biological siege on our minds. The house was not haunted. It was sick. It had been sick since before I was born. It had made us sick too, subtly, insidiously. The horrors of my childhood, the nightmares, the constant terror, were not phantoms. They were symptoms. They were a physical reaction to a living, creeping horror growing within the walls. The house had infected us. It had changed our perception of reality. It had fed on our sanity for decades. The revelation was not a comfort. It was a new, terrifying layer of truth. Hell existed as a name whispered across all creation, carrying the dread of infinite torment. Mortals shuddered at its mention, imagining realms of ceaseless agony and damnation stretching into eternity. They spoke of infernal fires, the rending of souls, and the ultimate inescapable consequence for their earthly transgressions. The idea of this place instilled terror in every living thing, a fear that shaped their choices and dictated their prayers. This dark dominion loomed large in their consciousness, a final, unyielding destination for the condemned. Its reputation for horror was well earned, accepted as cosmic truth, a constant, chilling reminder of divine wrath. The universe acknowledged its terrible authority when hell was considered. I witnessed that fear myself, saw its grip on the countless arriving souls through the ages. From my vantage, I watched generations pour in, each one convinced their suffering would know no end. I heard their cries, their pleas fading into the heat and the screams that were the soundscape of this realm. My own existence here began long before most of their frantic imaginings took hold. The widespread belief in hell as an eternal prison, a final destination of unending despair, was always a great lie perpetuated by the fear itself. They never understood the true nature of this place, clinging to narratives of endless punishment. Hell was never eternal. It was merely a sentence. Each soul arrived to serve a finite period, working off their sins through precise suffering, eventually achieving a state of purified emptiness. They came to earn redemption, one agonizing moment after another, passing through the fires not to be consumed forever, but to be refined and released. This refinement was a daily, unending spectacle, a brutal cycle of suffering. The fires were not just heat, they were instruments shaped by the very sins that led souls here. Each transgression held its own specific consequence, a carefully calibrated torment designed to cleanse away the earthly corruption. Here, pain itself was the currency for salvation, a payment extracted in shrieks and a broken will until nothing remained but a hollowed-out purity. Those who surrendered to the relentless urges of their flesh found themselves in a realm of perpetual corrupted embrace. Their bodies, reformed here in crude imitation of life, were forced into an unending grotesque dance with forms born of their own debauchery. Limbs twisted against each other in a forced imitation of intimacy, skin grating on skin, not with pleasure, but with an abrasive burn that never cooled. Their desires, once fervent, became instruments of agony, each touch a searing pain, each sensation a violation of their own essence. They yearned for release from the forced entanglement, but the cycle continued, binding them tighter with every writhing attempt to escape the sickening embrace. The gluttons, once driven by boundless appetite, were subjected to a different kind of perpetual consumption. They stood before endless troughs, compelled to gorge on putrid, bubbling effluvium that oozed forth from the very ground. This foul substance tasted of decay and despair, burning their throats with every forced swallow, distending their reformed bellies until the skin stretched taut and tore. Yet, they could never sate their hunger, nor could they cease consumption. The agony of constant ingestion, coupled with the stench and taste of pure corruption, defined their existence, each gulp another agonizing step towards emptying their souls of their earthly gluttony. Souls marked by avarice suffered beneath mountains of sharp, worthless shards. They dug through heaps of rusted iron and broken glass, each piece cutting into their flesh, drawing a slow, dark ichor. Their hands, forever reaching for treasures that were never truly theirs, were condemned to sift through this caustic debris, searching for an elusive, non-existent reward. Every sharp edge, every sharp fragment, served as a reminder of their grasping nature, tearing away at their physical form and their spiritual being. They yearned to stop, to let go of the pain, but an internal compulsion, born of their own past desires, forced them to continue the endless, agonizing search. Not all souls endured these specific tortures in perpetuity. Some, having endured the initial period of suffering, their former personalities stripped away, and their wills broken, were repurposed. These individuals, blank-faced and silent, became the wardens of this brutal economy. Their eyes were empty, their movements were mechanical, carrying out their new function with exact efficiency. They marched through the various realms of torment, prodding, pushing, and restraining those still thrashing against their fate. These repurposed souls wielded whips of solidified flame, not as instruments of additional punishment, but as tools to maintain the relentless progression of atonement. They were the intermediaries, themselves purified to a point, now tasked with ensuring the purification of others, their own redemption found in the unwavering application of this horrific, necessary process. The ceaseless din of torment, a constant roar that had defined this realm for eons, began to recede. It was a gradual change, almost imperceptible at first, a slow diminishment of the pervasive noise. The screams, once an unrelenting chorus of agony, lessened their intensity, then grew more spaced out, eventually becoming isolated wails in the expanding quiet. I observed the shift from my position, feeling the very fabric of hell alter around me. The air itself seemed to thin, carrying fewer of the familiar sounds of despair. This decline was not sudden. It unfolded over centuries, a persistent retreat of the suffering that powered this existence. Entire sections of hell, once teeming with souls undergoing their specific torments, emptied out. The grotesque dances of the lustful ceased, leaving their twisted chambers desolate. The gluttons' troughs, once overflowing with putrid matter, dried to crusts, and their former occupants simply vanished from existence. The mountains of sharp shards, where the avaricious toiled, lay undisturbed, their tormentors gone, their compelled searching ended. Trillions of souls, a number beyond mortal comprehension, simply reached their endpoint, their purification complete, and then they were gone, leaving no trace behind them, only the growing vacancy. Even the wardens, those repurposed, blank-faced enforcers of atonement, began to dwindle. Their mechanical marches became less frequent, their whips of solidified flame resting motionless in abandoned posts. I would see them one day, then not the next, their places taken by nothing but the growing emptiness. The sheer scale of the disappearance was staggering. This was not the usual ebb and flow of souls, but a wholesale emptying, a cosmic expurgation. The machinery of atonement, once relentless, wound down to a crawl, then to an almost complete stop. An unexplained shift had taken hold of hell, reducing its once terrible activity to a chilling stillness. A vast expanse now stretched where infinite suffering once resided, leaving only desolation. The last wisp of suffering faded into nothingness, leaving hell empty. The final scream echoed faintly from a forgotten chasm, dissolving into the quiet. All the others had departed, their sentences completed, their souls purified and gone from this realm. I remained, an unchanging fixture in the accelerating quiet, observing their final departures, each one a step further into unknown freedom. I was the first soul ever to arrive in this place, set here before the great machinery of atonement began its long, brutal grind. My status in this realm was absolute, a permanent installation, bound to this emptying dominion with no hope of reprieve. I was the ultimate consequence. The fires died, one by one, across the layers of hell. Their heat dissipated slowly, gradually, until a deep cold settled over everything. The molten rivers of pain solidified into obsidian channels, brittle and still. The air itself grew thin and sharp, carrying the bitter scent of cosmic cessation. The darkness deepened, becoming absolute, swallowing the last echoes of past torment, consuming the memory of warmth and sound. No light now touched this forgotten realm. No sound disturbed the deep stillness that had claimed hell, leaving only a vast, empty expanse. I stood alone, the last sentinel, abandoned to this desolate, frozen eternity. My damnation was simply being here, forever watching over nothing at all. The flatbed rebar truck ahead filled my view on the highway, its metal load piled high. An inexplicable apprehension tightened in my stomach, drawing my eyes to the frayed straps struggling with the heavy weight. That bad feeling intensified. Then one strap snapped with a loud crack. Another gave way immediately. The entire bundle of metal bars shifted, straining against its few remaining fasteners. A single thick rebar detached itself, spinning free from the chaos. It shot directly at my windshield, an unstoppable trajectory. The sharp end shattered the glass, punching through the opening directly into my chest and finding my heart with brutal force. A searing pain erupted, then vanished into a sudden coldness. All warmth drained from my body completely, vanishing from my skin, my muscles, and deep inside my bones. My vision faded to black before the screech of tires even reached my ears. The world ended for me then, death claiming me before my car slammed into the concrete divider. The blackness finally yielded, not into any form of light, but into the return of my senses. Sentience returned with a jarring jolt. I existed again, devoid of sight. My body felt confined, pressed in on all sides. The air I breathed was thick and warm, smelling faintly of something organic and wet. My hands, when I tried to move them, encountered a surface that was soft and yielding yet firm everywhere I touched. It felt like warm flesh, and it was damp, pulsing with a slow rhythm. This rhythm was steady and vibrated through my bones. The enclosure was small. My head touched one soft wall, my feet pressed against another. My arms could not fully extend without hitting the sides, trapped in this dark space, and it was moist. Panic surged through me, a cold fear spreading through my limbs. I pushed against the soft boundaries, but they only gave slightly before pressing back, unwavering. My attempts to call out produced only a gurgle. The sound immediately swallowed by the close air, and it was wet. Then I heard them. Muffled voices reached me from beyond the pliable walls, distinct tones filled with a high-pitched glee. This glee was strange. They seemed to swell and recede, a chorus that was continuous and incomprehensible. Their joy felt strange, and it intensified the terror building within me. This place defied any understanding, any memory of life or death I possessed. I was trapped, blind and bewildered by the sounds of glee on the other side of my enclosure. It was confining and wet. The soft enclosure seemed to tighten around me, inch by agonizing inch. The damp, yielding surfaces that had once provided a small measure of give now pressed in with constant force. My chest felt constricted, making each breath a conscious effort. I tried to move, to shift my weight, but the space had shrunk so much that my knees bumped against the fleshy wall in front of me, and my shoulders scraped against the sides. Every slight movement became a struggle, a fight against the relentless pressure. My body was forced into a curled position, my limbs tangled, my head bowed low to fit. The muffled voices from beyond the pliable walls grew in intensity, losing their distant quality. What was once a strange, high-pitched glee transformed into a continuous, deafening roar. It vibrated through the very substance of my confinement, a relentless, overwhelming sound that pounded against my ears and skull. The incessant high-pitched clamor offered no respite, forcing its way into my mind, leaving no space for thought. The sound itself pressed in from all sides, a force adding to the growing constriction of my prison. The unrelenting pressure on my body and the ceaseless, chaotic roar began to steal my coherence. Disorientation settled deep, a dizzying, sickening sensation of terror and confusion. I no longer perceived which way was up or down, or understood how long I had existed in this shrinking, pulsating darkness. Panic surged, a hot, desperate wave threatening to consume me entirely. I pushed, clawed, and thrashed against the constricting walls, but they held firm, always pressing closer, always shrinking, always wet. The continuous high-pitched sounds accompanied my struggles, driving me closer to an unbearable breaking point. The walls pressed in with crushing force, squeezing the very breath from my lungs. The relentless pressure peaked, threatening to obliterate me completely within the suffocating darkness. A sudden, searing light burst forth, overwhelming all other sensations. Two enormous hands gripped my head, pulling me forward with an irresistible force. The confining, fleshy walls released their hold, and I plunged into a torrent of movement and chaos. The maddening roar from outside changed, now sharp and immediate, filled with distinct shouts and cries. New, cold air flooded my lungs for the first time, shocking my entire system. Then a voice, close and urgent, commanded, "Breathe. Push." My body convulsed, a guttural cry tearing from my raw throat. My eyes opened to a dizzying blur of bright colors, and the world expanded around me, vast and overwhelming. The muffled voices resolved into urgent chatter, and a new chorus of sounds assaulted my ears, sharp and clear. This was not an afterlife, nor a prison, but a new beginning. Christmas had become a chore for me, a series of joyless obligations stretching ahead. I told Owen I needed something different, something to break the pattern. He agreed, though I knew he just wanted the holidays done. We ended up at the local charity shop, its quiet aisles filled with items left behind. My fingers brushed a sturdy cardboard box tucked away on a lower shelf, held shut by faded red string. I bought it, drawn to its simple appearance. Owen raised an eyebrow at my purchase. "Looks like something right out of a horror film," he joked, but I just smiled, imagining the unique ornaments on our tree. Back home, the living room felt stark. We opened the box carefully, pulling out a jumble of tarnished baubles, wooden figures, and thin paper angels. The scent of aged pine needles combined with old cardboard. We began decorating, placing each ornament on the green branches. We thought only of making our home festive. The flat now smelled of pine. A quiet click sounded from the living room, near where the tree stood. My head snapped up, and I walked back into the room. The nutcracker on the mantelpiece, which had faced us, had turned. Its painted head now faced the window, away from the room. I stopped and stared at the wooden figure, then walked closer. I reached out a hand to turn it back, but hesitated. I went into the bathroom. When I looked at the mirror, I gasped. A word, Minix, had formed there, written in condensed moisture. I wiped it away, my hand shaking. I walked back to the living room, my gaze fixed on the tree. The thin paper angels hanging from the branches shifted. They rustled, though no door or window stood open. Owen came into the room from the kitchen. He looked at my pale face, then at the tree. His eyes widened when he saw the angels move again, a whisper of paper in the still air. We stood together, watching the swaying angels. We had no explanation. My breath caught in my throat. "We have to leave," I told Owen, my voice tight with fear. He looked at my face, then back at the quietly rustling paper angels. He seemed about to speak, his gaze distant for a second, lost in thought. A violent crack then sounded directly above us. The room's lights instantly snapped off, plunging us into a disorienting, sudden dimness. My vision went black for a moment before my eyes struggled to adjust. The faint glow from the streetlights outside the window offered little help. The living room, moments ago so familiar, had become a vast, formless space. I searched frantically for the Christmas tree, where it had stood tall and decorated only seconds before. My gaze swept the area, seeking its familiar shape. The corner was empty, the tree was completely gone from its spot. An empty, terrifying void now filled the space where it had stood. A cold, papery brush grazed the hair on my neck. The distinct scent of pine and old metal flooded my senses then. It stood there, directly behind me. The angel garland rustled. The sound held an ominous, knowing quality. It was laughter. Owen gasped beside me, his fear a cold presence in the crowded room. We were cornered, helpless, caught by the thing we had brought inside. I carried the memory for 20 years. It disturbed my sleep without fail. Billy's name replayed in my thoughts, a truth I could not escape. The weight of what we had done, or failed to do, pressed down on my chest every single day. I knew the only way to find peace was to face it. That morning, I picked up the phone and dialed Steve's number. My fingers trembled as I heard it ring. There was no other choice. We shared this heavy secret, this knowledge of what happened to Billy years ago. It had festered between us without a spoken word about it since that day. Now, it was time to speak. Steve's voice on the phone had been distant, but he agreed to meet without hesitation. He arrived that afternoon, his face lined with the years, a mirror to my own weariness. We did not speak of Billy directly at first. Instead, we spoke of our childhood, of the long summer days that stretched endless under the hot sun. The conversation drifted inevitably towards the familiar landmarks of our youth. Our memories landed on the old concrete dam by the creek, the forbidden playground where we spent so many hours. a place full of both danger and thrill. We both remembered the deep, dark spillway, a treacherous drop we knew was off limits. We had spotted Billy there that afternoon, alone near the edge, his small figure gazing into the churning water below. It was my idea to call him over. A casual wave, a whisper about a secret passage, a hidden cave only we knew existed inside the dam's old structure. Steve played along, his eyes meeting mine in silent agreement. It was a lie we both told with ease. We led him, a boy trusting us, to the perilous concrete cylinder, the deep hole that descended into the unknown. We watched him step inside, his yellow raincoat a splash of color before he vanished from our sight. Then we turned and we ran, not looking back. We never saw him again. We both knew, deep in our bones, that the answer to his fate lay hidden in that dark, cold place. The nightmares had grown worse, relentless visions of a small figure at the edge of the hole. There was no escape from them anymore. Steve looked as worn as I felt when we met again. Neither of us spoke much on the drive to the old dam. The air in the car was thick with unaddressed history. The concrete structure loomed larger than I remembered it, stark and gray against the overcast sky. The old spillway, the deep cylinder, seemed to pull at us, a dark maw demanding its due. We brought a coil of thick rope and a powerful flashlight. Steve secured one end around a sturdy, rusted rebar jutting from the concrete edge. He held the other end firmly in his hands. I looked into the depths, a blackness that seemed to absorb all light. The concrete walls of the shaft were slick with dampness and moss. Taking a deep breath, I gripped the rope and began my descent. The air grew colder with each foot I dropped into the earth. The sound of my own breathing echoed unnaturally in the confined space. The flashlight beam cut through the intense darkness, revealing only patches of wet concrete. My boots scraped against the rough surface. Further down, my light caught a vivid patch of yellow. My stomach clenched. There it was, unmistakable. Billy's yellow raincoat, crumpled in a sodden heap on the floor of the shaft. My fingers shook as I reached for it. Beneath the coat lay a small, water-damaged notebook. The pages were swollen and brittle. My hands trembled as I opened it. Billy's childish handwriting filled the first page, then more desperate scribbles, details of his final moments trapped in the cold darkness. Further inside, partially obscured by debris and years of sediment, I saw what remained of him. The bones were small, tangled with remnants of fabric. Billy was there. I knelt there, my hand still holding the notebook, the small bones a stark reality. He had been here all this time, 20 years in this dark, cold place. A wave of sorrow, thick and cold, washed over me. "Steve," my voice cracked as it echoed in the shaft. "I found him. I found Billy." I looked up towards the opening, expecting Steve's shared horror, his relief. His head appeared, silhouetted against the gray sky. There was no grief in his eyes. A mask of pure rage seized his features. His jaw was tight. "You found him," Steve said, his voice hard, each word distinct. "And now everyone will know. You always were the weak one, always wanting to confess." My heart pounded with a sudden, sharp fear. Steve's eyes fixed on the rope I held, then on the serrated knife he pulled from his pocket. The steel blade glinted. "You should have just kept quiet," he muttered. He brought the blade down, a swift, decisive movement. The thick rope snapped with a terrifying crack. The cut rope fell, its end dangling uselessly just above my outstretched hand. The light from above vanished as Steve backed away from the opening. Darkness enveloped me, colder than before, absolute. I was alone, trapped with the small, silent remains of Billy. Steve was gone, free, leaving me here to face everything. The shaft became my tomb. I lay in my bed when a sudden coldness permeated the room. The air around me grew dense, and an unnatural chill seeped into my bones, though the temperature did not drop. A vast shadow formed in the corner, swelling to fill the entire space. It held no distinct shape. It was an immense, shifting presence that defied my mind's grasp. This grotesque entity, impossibly large, absorbed all light and sound. Dread seized me, a terrible weight settling deep within my chest as I watched its formless bulk pulsate in the darkness of my own bedroom. The terrible dread lifted from my chest. Clarity filled my mind, and I felt no panic. A thought entered my mind with complete clarity. It was not spoken. "You are not afraid." The entity communicated. It was a presence within my thoughts, and it made no sound. I did not hear words, but I understood the entity's meaning within my consciousness. "You should be." You should be? I understood its nature then. Recognition was immediate. This was death itself. Its form existed beyond human comprehension. "So you are it," I thought, directing my consciousness toward the impossible shadow. "I am that which ends." A response came. A chill settled in my awareness. I expected more drama, I suppose, I projected. Or less. The entity shifted. Or less. The entity shifted. A subtle change occurred. "T?" I asked, my internal voice steady. "Not yet," it replied. "This is merely an introduction." "T.A. An introduction is a good start," I mused. A strange boldness rose within me. An introduction alone does not provide understanding. I would need more time to truly understand you. T. The entity paused. The moment stretched beyond the confines of my bedroom. "And what would you call such a meeting?" Chi. A. Teat. We could arrange a proper date, sometime in the future, when we both have more time. The vast shadow did not move. Then it ceased to be. It did not fade or dissipate. One moment it filled my room and my mind, and the next it was gone. It left no trace, not even a memory of its former presence within the physical space. Yet, it was still here. My room was just my room again. The coldness vanished. The air returned to normal. I lay in my bed and stared at the ceiling, feeling an absence and a presence all at once. Fear had departed with the entity, leaving no panic or dread within me, and my perception of the world changed. Every breath I took carried a new weight. My days now held a different purpose, a quiet countdown. I walked through the world with an unnerving awareness of its true nature. Life continued around me, but my own internal clock ticked to a different rhythm. A unique readiness settled in my spirit, a strange anticipation that now defined my existence. I knew it would return. I lived for that inevitable future meeting, the second date, when we would finally truly get acquainted.